Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning. I want to encourage these two ladies back here. Do you mind coming to another table just because we're going to do some group work today, and it'd be nice to be at fuller tables, and I don't think we'll fill the whole room. Good morning. Thanks for being here early on Thursday. Hope you've had a great beginning to the conference. And I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Sandra Johnson. I'm the director of the Weill Music Institute at Carnegie Hall, which is the Hall's education and community programs arm. And we are going to talk today about urgent civic priorities and what orchestras are doing and can do to respond in powerful ways to the needs of our communities. I want to ask my panelists here who are in this session with me to introduce themselves briefly.
I'm Warren Hyer. I serve as executive director for the Central Ohio Symphony. We're a small per-service orchestra just outside of Columbus, Ohio.
I'm Sandra Jackson-Dumont, and I am currently at the Seattle Art Museum as the deputy director for education and public program and curator in modern contemporary art. And I'm going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to become chairman of education and programs there.
People are impressed by that. That's exciting. Very exciting.
I haven't even done anything.
Thank you both. So, and this is my colleague Christopher Amos from Carnegie Hall. He's helping me with slides and organizing technology this morning. So thank you, Christopher. So today we are going to look at some of the key principles to doing this kind of work in our communities that really responds to urgent civic priorities. So we'll talk through some of those principles. We'll hear some examples of work that's happening in orchestras, and we will give you a chance to think about what this might mean in your own community and in your own orchestra. I want to just begin with this notion of community needs assessment. So let's say we want to, within our orchestras, do work that is actually going to make significant contributions to the needs of our communities. How do we know what those needs are? Well, we have to do community needs assessment, which is a fancy way of saying we need to ask. And we need to develop sophistication about the way that we ask and the way that we listen to what people tell us. And we're going to talk more about this. Sandra in particular is going to talk about this a little bit later. But I'll just say that the way I like to think about this is that you want to ask people from a lot of different perspectives, people who work in different kinds of organizations, people who work with your community's government, people who work in nonprofits, people who are in schools, community members of various kinds. Obviously, you want to be asking these questions with your board and others who have different points of view about the needs of a community. So that's number one. Number two, you need to then look at those needs in relationship to your strengths and capacities as an orchestra, given your musicians and who you are as an organization. I think it's very easy to hear about a particular need and hear described in a particular way and start to try to find the way towards doing something about that, and then realize that actually you don't have an artistic response to that need. It may not be the right thing for the orchestra to actually be trying to engage with. And that is an important thing to remember. Even when we do have a genuine artistic response that really makes sense in relationship to a need, it is likely to still require you as an organization to learn things, professional development for musicians so that they are really well equipped and feel empowered to do whatever program is developed in response to that need. But it's really important to remember that you don't have to respond to everything, and you can't. We can't respond to everything. I will tell a little tiny story from Carnegie Hall and just share a tiny bit of work to give an example of this. We have been in a major partnership with Jacobi Medical Center in the South Bronx for about 5 years now. And at one point, after a big culmination of a 4-month-long songwriting project with adolescent HIV patients, we were in a planning conversation with the hospital. And so we had, you can picture the table, it has physicians, nurses, hospital staff, Carnegie Hall staff, musicians who had been doing the work. all sorts of people around this table, and the hospital was pitching different projects. They seemed to want to do a songwriting project in every area of the hospital. And when they were pitching for things, we were saying, tell us more about that. What is the need in that area? And I was surprised by some of them. They wanted to do something even in the emergency department, which I thought was kind of strange. But where we landed was in a conversation with the neonatal group about the big challenges that the hospital faces around pregnant teens. So in this major urban area, in the South Bronx, there are a lot of pregnant teens who are coming to the hospital for their neonatal care. They are often, unfortunately, dealing with a lot of challenges. They're often living in poverty. They're often having a challenging time with their families. You can imagine they're 14, 15, 16, pregnant. That can be a very difficult situation, obviously, for a family. Often they're being ostracized by friends, or they just sort of lose touch with friends. School can be hard. And in part as a result of all of these things, there's a clinical or medical issue that emerges, which is that they have a hard time attaching emotionally to their unborn children and to their young children. And that's it's a major wellness and health issue. And so we wondered about a lullaby project. We wondered if maybe inviting these young women to create lullabies in collaboration with musicians, specifically for their children, might be helpful. And we ended up piloting that project there at Jacobi. In the first year, we did a couple of projects there. And the work has now expanded out to homeless shelters. We do lullaby projects at Rikers Island, which is the city jail in New York City, where women can keep their children, their babies, with them for the first year of the infant's life. And increasingly, lullaby is expanding. And so this is an example of hearing about a very specific, particular need, understanding that more, and then building a program that felt artistically like it made sense. We could develop something that would be interesting and rich from a musical perspective, and that also would have, we hoped anyway, an impact on the well-being side. And we have measured this and have found out all kinds of positive things about impact. So I just want to bring a tiny bit of the work into the room and show you the performance of a lullaby. This is from a culminating concert, and you will see musicians, professional musicians, and the singer and writer of the lullaby is on the right hand side of the stage. Young women don't always perform with the artists, but in this case, that ended up being the right thing to do.
You can see how much fun this work is.
There did end up being a lot of humor in those lullabies as well. So this is part of a larger program at Carnegie Hall called Musical Connections that is active in correctional facilities, including a major commitment to the juvenile justice spectrum all the way across the city and all the city government agencies that oversee various parts of juvenile justice, work in maximum security, and work in healthcare settings and homeless shelters. So just a taste of that. I'm going to invite you now to think a little bit about community needs assessment in your own town, in your own community. You'll see that you have the League's tool to look at this and look at civic engagement on your tables. I'm just going to invite you to take a couple of minutes and think and jot down some notes on if you were beginning to do community needs assessment, who would you talk to? And just make a wide-ranging list. Who are some of the specific people? Let's try to think specifically. And if you don't know a specific person at an organization, let's make a list of organizations. Who are the kinds of folks you would want to engage with and have discussions with about what's happening in your community? We'll just take a few minutes to do that. And everybody has one of those forms. And once you've made that list, also look through this tool and just take a scan. Think about where you think you are in relationship to this League tool, pointing you in the direction of thinking about engagement across the community.
Good morning. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our program, which is Reconnecting. It's a therapeutic drumming program that we started a little more than a year ago. I have 15 minutes, so I'm going to try and keep this moving here quickly. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it is, how it started, and then where it's going, where we're taking it from that point. Drumming circles, and the way that we're using them, or the organization, we're using the mental health and the treatment and addiction treatment courts, which are in our county. There are specialized courts. Ohio is a leader in specialized courts. It's a process where instead of a person, often a person will have an offense due to a drug situation or to a mental health situation, and rather than incarcerate them, they go through anywhere from a 9-month to 2-year process of mentoring with a judge, a doctor, therapeutic organization, and so forth. It's great cost savings to community, and it works very well for the participants. We found that the courts needed a greater variety of resources to provide the activities and motivation and incentives for the offenders to complete the program. It is a 2-year program. We identified drumming circles as an alternative treatment option, and the courts loved the idea. Quickly, the benefits for the courts, for the participants, it's non-threatening, it's safe, it's not being incarcerated. For the courts and the treatment provider, it provides additional treatment options that are effective. They match the court's program, which is a multi-phase program, a 3-phase program, and it provides a new spectrum for gauging how those in the program are reacting and some of their personality. For the symphony, it's really enhanced our mission. It meets the community needs. It's innovative, and we really like to be innovative and creative. And it provides an opportunity for engagement for us outside the concert hall. And that's a real big issue for us. We try to do as much outside the hall, oftentimes without any music at all, but some way that we have a presence. The partnership uses therapeutic drumming to engage court-involved adolescents and adults now in our new program who are there because of either drug or mental health issues. The purpose is to help them gain control over their illnesses or substance disorders, take responsibilities for their offense and their progress, and to reconnect healthier individuals as families and community. Many of those that are in this program are multi-generational. It's not only the adolescent that has a problem, but their parents are on drugs and their grandparents are on drugs. So it's a multi-generational issue. We are now expanding the program to an adult population and a population at the local treatment provider. And if you'll just quickly show, those are some of our partners along with us. Let me tell you a little bit more. This program is not about musicianship. It's not about learning to play drums. It's really about using the drums to improve communication and overcome treatment barriers. It's an alternative form of speaking, unlocking avenues of expression, and showing personal growth and leadership skills. Our role, actually, we're involved in the courts. We meet with the judges, we meet with the probation officers, we're there for graduation, we discuss briefing sessions as to progress. So we're really involved in the courts. We also now serve on the treatment advisory board in our community, and very unexpectedly, we're also serving as a fiscal agent for their incentive fund. So they're not allowed to ask for money, and they're not allowed to hold the money, the courts. So we are actually serving to hold the money for their incentive fund. And some of these incentives are little things like candy bars and CDs and so forth. To us, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but for somebody, a youth in the court program, sometimes that's just a real nice acknowledgement of some simple progress that they've made. How the program started. It started a couple of unusual ways. One is I'm a percussionist, and it was at the Percussive Arts Society International Convention. And my wife went along, who is not a musician, and so she went off to a drumming circle seminar and came back and said, "You really got to go see this." So I went to one later in the day and met a great lady who was a facilitator who took us through, in 30 minutes, through the entire 4th grade music curriculum standards. And my light went off and I said, wow, this is a way that we can meet educational needs. And as I started looking more and more into the drumming, I had another connection with my wife. She's a retired attorney. and we were sitting down one night, and she was establishing the mental health courts for the judge, and she said, we just don't know what to do with the people in the program. And I said, drumming circles. And she looked at me and she says, yes, what a great idea. So we visited other mental health courts around the state. We talked to them about our program. Nobody had considered music. We met with the judges in our community. We talked about what we'd like to do, asked them for their feedback. It took us 2 years to find the funding. We were able to do that. We received 2 Getty grants to put this program into place, the only one in the criminal justice program. And now we have a program that is highly endorsed by the courts, which is great. We've got judges who are out telling the community about our programming. Our key steps, we identified an area where we could help the courts. We were able to offer programs that had proven results. This is part of a national protocol. This isn't something that we invented. We actually have training in this area. We're entrusted in our community for our business practices and organizational quality. We offered the program without cost. It doesn't cost the courts anything for us to do this program. We offered it purely for the community benefit. We're not asking people to come into our office and do things. We were willing to invest the time in finding more about the court's programs before ours started so that we had a real good idea what direction we were heading. And we are in a smaller community, about 37,000. So we know a lot of the players in the community, and the community knows us pretty well. In terms of building relationships, which is kind of one of the things you were talking about, how to build relationships. One, right off the bat is, it's a lot easier once you get started. If you got your first program going, it's real easy to build upon that. It's a little bit difficult to get the first one going, particularly something as innovative and novel as this. Working with the courts has given us great credibility. We've built on that credibility by doing public drumming demonstrations. We've done them for United Way, Rotary, City Council, Mental Health Resources Board, explaining what this is, the protocol. We have them, we actually have the people in these different organizations come in and do the drumming program. And so they get to understand it one-on-one. We do a lot of engagement programming in the community, not just this. We do almost all of it at no cost. Outside of concerts, a lot of activities we do, and there are too many for me to really summarize here, but we just do them for no cost. Often there's no music. I'll give you one example. We did a space program with KV-265 and the planets presentation, and we invited a NASA scientist to come in and talk to all the middle schools about careers in science. We didn't do anything with the music. Our project goals are always community enrichment in some form or another. And we generally tend to avoid discussions about how we need money and how you need to come to our concerts. We do them just simply as a presentation. We have also gained some credibility. A couple years ago, we set some pretty high standard of benchmarks as a nonprofit in terms of board recruitment, what we're expecting, and some of our long-term planning. We've actually been out and presenting that to organizations in our community, so that's helped us with the credibility. And then in 2010, we were lucky enough to do one of the Ford Made in America projects, and we had Joe Schwantner in for a week's residency. We did them all over Central Ohio, but that also gave us great credibility in the community, and we did lots of really innovative programs. So people are expecting kind of unusual, off-the-wall things from us a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about where we're going with the program. And you see a list here. We are doing now drumming circles for the cancer support community in Central Ohio. They actually wrote the grant. They're just paying us to do it. Ohio Health is a huge medical provider in Central Ohio. We had a quick meeting with them. They said, make us a proposal, and then the person from Ohio Health said to me, you know, Ohio Health has lots of money. And I thought, boy, that's a great thing to hear. We're doing a second year of a summer lunch program in a Title I school. The Salvation Army has approached us about doing drumming for their human trafficking program. We met with them earlier this week, and they said, we want you to sit down with us and talk about this and then make us a proposal. And that's really great, because now I already know what they want us to do. Looking at doing some SAC programs and we're involved in lots of other aspects of this one program in our community. We've got now other courts in other counties asking us to consider doing this program. One of the other benefits has been we're proposing a small summer music festival next year. And what we're finding now is that other organizations are proposing to other organizations to work with us. To give you an example, I contacted the director of the local library and said, can we use the library for a session for the Summer Music Festival? And she said, yes. And then she said, would you like a letter of support from Rotary? Would you like a letter of support from this other organization? That's really great. It saves me a lot of time, and it really builds lots of great connections. Quickly, I'm going to show you a little bit one of the items that we use. This is a community resource map. Real simple. Actually, we borrowed this from the courts. The courts use this, and I thought this is great enough. So we just kind of put our logo in the middle of it. We're just starting on a strategic plan, and this is one of the tools that we'll use with the board. We'll take this out in the community and use this tool too. We'll go to the community foundation and say, what do you know about these other groups in a program that we might be able to use? Next slide. Chamber of Commerce keeps a list of all of the agencies in our area. This is one out of maybe 6 pages. And it lists for me who's involved, what the organization is. So we just asked the Chamber for this list, and it's a great list to work on. Quickly then, the impact. One of the great impacts for us is it really has challenged our board to look at supporting our mission in new ways. And we've changed our mission. We don't have the typical 4 or 5 sentence mission. Ours is 5 words: engaging the community through music. And that's that simple. It's also have the board looking more outward in our community and more willing to innovate and be creative. We are being approached, as I say, by other groups about doing projects. One of those is the Lullaby Project in Carnegie Hall, and in fact the league suggested that we be considered for that, and we're discussing it internally about how we might be able to do it. It's opened up new funding options for us, both organizational and corporate. I'll give you one example. We're looking at the Lullaby Project, and I thought, okay, who can I get to fund this? And then I suddenly realized we have one of the largest infant diaper plants in our community. So I'm going to go talk to them about this. It has us participating in a much broader part of the community than we might otherwise. New geographies, surrounding communities that we sometimes have real difficulty interacting with. It's given us opportunities for press coverage. We've been on television with the drumming program, and the newspapers carry it. We've also been able to identify a broader range of musician talents. We're finding talents of the musicians that we never knew they had. And that's really helpful for us in knowing where to go and expand. And then it also allows us to be connected to people who we might not otherwise be connected with. One of our goals is that we contact everybody in our community, whether they ever come to a concert or not. But somewhere along the line, we have made some kind of contact with everybody in our community. That's one of our goals. 1 minute, and that's right, my last slide. So how do we bring this back to our audiences? We were the first orchestra in the country to do a Kickstarter campaign. And our campaign is we are commissioning from a composer a work for drum circle and orchestra. And the drum circle will be made of those people in the court program. So we're actually taking our program out to the courts, and then we're bringing an example of it back to our concert audience, and they'll be performing with us in a world premiere this year. And my last slide is my contact information. We're easy to find on the web. I'd be delighted to talk with you at any time about what we're doing and share ideas.
Thank you, Warren. That's a great story about what's happening in Central Ohio. And now I'm going to hand to Sandra, who's going to talk a little bit more about community and how one understands community priorities, respectful relationship building, etc. So I think we're going to switch spots here.
I'm going to switch seats. So how are you guys defining community? Just call out. Like for example, a lot of places I work, they define community as brown people. It's code word for brown people. So, I mean, I'm being really honest. I'm the person that Heather told me to come and just say the thing. So, for other people, how are you defining community? Is it geography? Like, put it out there. Geography. near Carnegie Hall?
Well, we think of community much more broadly, and at least in terms of the city, which means that there are many, 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 many communities within that location.
Communities with IES. Anyone else?
Connectedness, a sense of community.
Sense of community, so shared ideas and values. How many of you, none of you work at an organization where you define communities as under-resourced or brown people? Oh, okay. Or at risk, maybe? I mean, we can be honest, it's just us.
Yeah, well, I think the word over the years has become code for poor, black, Hispanic. Community is not where for us white people is a concern.
Okay, did everyone hear that? Yeah. Okay. So that's really important. So communities with an S, and it's actually become code word in many ways for a very specialized community. And I'm oftentimes asking people I work with, why aren't we being specific in what we're describing as community? So why aren't we saying actually this particular community? Because then you actually can get to the needs, right? And you actually know who you're talking about as opposed to this very broad swath. And when you're saying broad, you mean like, oh wow, the geography is big, but within that community there are many communities, and within even that little community there are many communities. So the reason I bring that up, and I'm going to fly through a ton of slides, is because oftentimes we don't want to have that conversation except in a grant proposal, because it doesn't sound cool to say that to someone to their face. And so what I think, and I know I work in museums, you all work in orchestras. I work with musicians a lot, and you'll see some examples of it. And so a lot of times when I go to meetings in different communities, if you will, whether it's a school board meeting or a community center or a church or in an orchestra, a room of people from orchestras, they go around the room and they say, I'm blah, 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 and I'm from the central area, da-da-da. I'm da-da-da, and I'm from the Harlem Children's Zone. I'm blah, 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 and I'm from the such and such, or I'm from the Rotary. And then it gets to me, and I say, I'm Sandra Jackson-Dumont from the Seattle Art Museum. And they go, what are you doing here? Because, and if they don't say that, they think it oftentimes, because they're kind of like, why would a museum be in a setting like this, talking about something that I love you said, drumming as an alternative treatment plan, right? And so I'm going to flip through a bunch of slides that actually trigger more personal stories that I think will help, for me, that will help get at why and how we have been doing the work that we've been doing at the Seattle Art Museum. Does that make sense? I'm going to fly through. So, so this is actually a conversation about being real, if you know, just being really, truly honest. And I've been thinking a lot about how the most amazing organizations that I have ever worked with or heard about have an incredible series of personalities associated with them that have a certain shine about them that makes them attractive. And that actually makes the organization attractive. And so as a result, I've been thinking about personal shine and organizational integrity. How do you make those things connect more? And so I was reading the Harvard Business Review, and I was on a flight, and there was a quote in one of the articles that said, before people decide what they think of your message, they decide what they think of you. So you can be talking all day long, but because of the way you may be behaving, they've actually decided what they think of you no matter what you're saying. And so I started thinking about, like, wow, wouldn't it be interesting if this person could actually connect more to the individual, or this individual connect more to the organization, but oftentimes there's a huge disconnect. It's as if they are unplugged. Somehow we see ourselves as service providers, where we actually are not a part of that community, but we come in and we are offering something to rescue someone from themselves or their current conditions. When in reality, most people don't need rescuing from their current conditions. They actually may need access to certain resources so that they actually create a more equitable situation for themselves so they can do for themselves. Does that make sense? So I started thinking about all the qualities that are associated with people that I like hanging out with. So they're warm, they're thoughtful, they're generous, they're courteous, they're respectful. But then I started thinking about why sometimes institutions don't feel that way, and it's because when we talk about institutions, we talk about them being cold and competitive and insular and they're specialists, they're purveyors of knowledge. I know how to make an amazing painting, and I know how to tell you about it. And you're really not that smart. Even though I didn't tell you that, that's maybe how you're feeling. And we're about systemic change. We focus on economy of scale, and we actually are physically planted here, and you have to come to us. And we may do a program because there's some grants out there that tell us we may need to do a program, or we actually feel like we should do the program, but we're only going to do it one time, and that was kind of mentioned before. We want to do it, but we don't know how to invest, so we do it once. So I'm always thinking about how those things kind of come more closely together. How does that institutional shine rub off on, how does that institutional integrity start to feel more like personal shine? How do those things come closer together? I know I'm not like a usual presenter, but this is how I do what I do. So it all dates back to my mom. All of our stories date back to our moms in so many ways. And so my mother's from Mississippi, and she moved to California. She took a bus there. And there are so many statements that come out of her like mouth that are like quotes. They're almost like parables, if you will. Or she believes they're parables, and then as a result, I actually believe they're parables. And so this is my mother when she was younger. Her name is Edie Jackson, and these are the things that are relative to my work. I realized that there's so many things that I learned early in life that actually, when I got into college or in my professional training, they became these sterile academic kind of perspectives on something that earlier in my life they were very personal, meaningful things that if I didn't address them, there were social ramifications. So she says, watch out for people who are pretty outside and ugly inside. So when you think about an institution, if we have outward values and we're saying one thing, but our practice even internally is broken, and the systems are not in place to actually support our external message, and I'll get into that a little later, we actually are not living our values. So be watchful of people that are pretty on the outside and ugly on the inside. I'm old, but I'm not dead. She believes in the cycle of life, that there are things that she had participated when she was young that she can do now, but there's also these relationships that are incredible. So don't just be infatuated with young people, but be infatuated with how they're going to live their lives throughout time. To whom much is given, much is required. All of us are given gifts, particularly if we have the privilege of working at organizations, arts organizations in particular, or in penal systems. We're custodians of stuff for the good of people. When I see it, I'll believe it. Now, this I know to be true personally. You can, again, say all those things. You can show up in my community. I will know that you care because you came back. I will know that you care because you came when you weren't doing something. I will know that you care because you came when you were not the center of attention. I'll pause for emphasis. So I started thinking about the things that are memorable for me, because for me, that's what matters most in life. And I started thinking about this thing that's been my mantra over the years, which is you had to be there. Like when I tell someone about a concert that I went to, and I tell them, you missed it, you had to be there. Like because of who I was sitting next to, not just what was on stage, but at intermission, who I had a conversation with. Who actually stood up and walked out during the presentation, like that crazy person, what were they thinking, you know? Oh, when the concerto, I mean, really? You know, and so my mom's experiences with that are around performers like Marvin Gaye and Luther Vandross and Luther Vandross is more younger than her, but Marvin Gaye and Teddy Pendergrass at the Fillmore in San Francisco. Like her image of that, I wasn't even born yet, but I've heard these women talk about these moments in time that I lust for because of how they talk about those experiences. This young woman that was on stage, you could see it on her face. She's gonna go home and tell her friends, like, I was on stage, you guys. Oh my God, I had an entire band backing me up. It's a whole narrative she's constructing around this whole thing, right? And so it's not just about the lullaby for the gift to the child, but it's also about her presence on stage and what happens after. And so I started thinking about how there are all these things that I didn't actually separate out until I got much older. There was all this muddiness in my life, how things just blended together. That church was very much, I talked about church the way my mom talked about the Marvin Gaye concert. I also talked about TV, the way my mother talked about the Marvin Gaye concert. This was my first image of a black artist ever. This is J.J. Evans from Good Times, for those of you who may not be of age or didn't watch TV. But here you go. But my first image of a black painter was on TV, not at a museum. And so when I think about this, I also start thinking about the other realities I had in my life. On your left is my first teaching artist with that bad afro. I mean, amazing. So I learned about ballet. She taught ballet and jazz dance in my community, and she took us to concerts from the community center, booked buses. And the woman on the left, or your right, is Angela Davis. So I learned about politics because I asked her about her afro. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because that actually spilled back into all these social things. These are Barbara Streisand, I loved her afro. All these other people, the musicians in my life, the writers, the political figures, Fannie Lou Hamer, testifying before courts. I mean, these were like thinkers and builders in community. And so I started to think about this ecology as I got older, this system of things that existed in the world. And I started to think about the role that culture and my everyday life had and its connection to power and influence. So as I got older, I started thinking about these objects that I get to talk about and engage with and connect to people in their everyday lives, like music, like this incredible prayer rug that hangs on a wall, but in its everyday practice is actually on a floor. And when I put an image up like that, the moment of relativity is totally different. We can talk about racial profiling, we can talk about war, we can talk about individual belief systems, we can talk about a whole host of things. So then we started thinking about how this actually functions inside of our organizations. And so I brought the everyday thing into the museum, worked with a contemporary artist and brought 5,000 albums. People take care of albums like musicians take care of instruments if they care enough about them, right? So I started thinking about how does that relate to how people are custodians of artwork. So we invited an artist from South Side of Chicago, Theaster Gates, to do an installation called The Listening Room. And we brought the everyday person's musician, the DJ, into the museum and had them play these objects that no one is really supposed to touch. And then we had these gatherings, and we talked about this idea of placemaking. Then we actually spilled outside of the museum. We started a record store in the community. And we actually ended up building this situation where people came in and we had musicians and writers and dancers and orchestra directors, all kinds of people come in and select albums from the Everyday People's Collection, play them and talk about how it related to their practice, and invite them back to their locations where they were playing music at the orchestra or the symphony or the holistic healing location. So these little spaces, the museum became a convening point for this ecology of activity that happened around the city. Then we said, okay, on the left actually is Quentin Morris, an incredible musician here in this community. He played at Carnegie Hall recently. And I said, can we connect you and the communities that you work with to this incredible installation? And he's like a proscenium stage performer. He performs on the stage. He's serious business, people. And I was like, why don't I connect you to known incredible dancer, Donald Byrd, who choreographed The Color Purple. And Donald Byrd came out of retirement because he felt challenged to dance on this rooftop, which was a sculpture created by an artist called We Will Blow the Roof Off This Mother, the Western Oracle. And so, here they are, and they're like crowds and crowds of people around them. But you have someone who is a classically trained musician playing for people in an environment they wouldn't otherwise think he would play. But then also inviting them to understand that there really are not boundaries between the stage that he performs on and the public space that they just call a park or a museum. And we invited other people. So I'm bringing up these examples because these are moments where we invited people to perform outside of their comfort zone. Yesterday, there was like a little going away party for me, and my old assistant put this slide up, and I thought, this is so great. This is your comfort zone. This is where the magic happens. And I just believe that to be true, and so I'm going to speed through the rest of these because I think they're really important to see. These crowds of people come out because there are these unique opportunities. And I'm bringing this up because things like taking your work outside of your physical space into unusual places becomes this really interesting opportunity to connect with people you wouldn't otherwise connect with. These are musicians. This is a dance company performing in sculpture from the museum's installation in Nordstrom's windows. And so this idea of building community can be really important. And these ideas about, in that case, it was about bringing happiness to the everyday interactions of people as they were passing through the street. The other thing is having people participate in activities that they would not otherwise participate in as adults in some cases. So in this moment, we're actually just having them draw. This is a Friday night. So one of the things that I think is imperative in building these relationships is this idea of speaking the truth and pointing to hope. So many times when we work with various communities, we actually don't tell the truth or tell them what our boundaries are or what resources we have or that we don't have. My favorite is when people say, well, we would love to actually come to the Seattle Art Museum, or I'm assuming this will happen at the Met, I'm only 14 days old there, and we want to do an exhibition tomorrow of artwork that has bees and lots of water and I don't know, maggots. Just pick it, you know. And we want to come and we want to do it tomorrow, and none of us have ever even come to the museum. Ever in my life, I'm not really actually interested. We just need a space. And so what I say, most of the time some people will say, okay, let's talk about this. Like literally, let's talk about this. And I would say, and sometimes I'm giving you an extreme example. It's like, I've never been to your place. I just want to come and do what I want to do. You know, it's a pretty location. Sometimes it's hard to say to someone, actually, you know, how about you come in and see what we do first? Actually, we're not able to do these things because the reality is that that's not a part of, it's not that it's not a part of what we do. It's just that we need a reason for it to exist at this place. Why does it need to happen here? And so over the years, I've come up with these 12 steps for infiltrating or implementing change and collaboration at an organization, or putting together some good ideas. So one of them is ask questions and also prepare the space. Who, why, what, when, where? Why do you feel this is imperative to do? Not just because it's, oh, I mean, we should be working with these young people. Or, oh my goodness, they need our help. Or there's a great opportunity, a grant out there, or it will make other people understand and know our practice. That's not even, to me, a great idea. I think being intentional, here's why we're doing this, here's how it relates to our mission and vision, here's actually how it relates to what they want to do, here's, did they come to us, did we come to them? Not that either or is better. Are we presenting a prepackaged program? Is it a push-in program? Are we able to adapt it to the needs of the group? I mean, just kind of knowing, you know, and being intentional. The other thing is find the choir and distribute the leadership. So this whole one-time thing that was mentioned earlier, I go to community board meetings. We go to that whole sitting around the table and someone saying, why are you here? I turn around and say, why are you here? You know, I think it's important because your credibility is not based on press. Your credibility is not based on the fact that you showed up at an event that you were producing. Your credibility is based on showing up when you actually have nothing that you want from that community, nor do you have anything that you're trying to give to them, which could be code word for peddling something. That you're just showing up to support something that they are actually doing that they value, and you're a member of that community on an ongoing basis, not one time. So 4 is develop rules of engagement and reciprocity. That, you know, partnerships are the most challenging work you can do. And I'm a little over. So it's the most challenging work you can do, but it's the best work if it's done well. It doesn't all have to be long term. That's a myth. I think if someone wants something short term and you want it to be short term, as long as there's mutual agreement, it's like any relationship. You know, I actually want to date you. I don't want to marry you. I just want to date you. You know, I'm not interested in marriage, or I want to marry you, but I actually don't want to be married forever, or whatever it is in your world. Whatever your world is, you know. Fly under the radar. I think that's important. Like if you're going to do something pretty amazing, like you can fly under the radar for a while, figure out what's happening. Let your hair down. If you do it this way and they don't do it that way and they work in a completely different way, or they work a certain way and they're rigid and you're loose, sometimes there's some meeting ground that has to happen, or just saying, this is not how we can do it. But if you value the relationship enough, you actually have to delve in. Create an ecosystem. Why are you doing this alone? Like, you're not going to get more credit. It doesn't work that way. The more you work with people, the more credit you get. The more, it's like you surround yourself with awesome people, you look better. And you work less, actually, honestly. She said the work is more interesting. In my world, also, you work less. Many hands lighten the load. Recruit the unusual suspects. I think those make the most amazing partnerships. When people talk to me about community, I often say, actually, are you talking about a community investment? Yeah, I'm happy to talk to them. Are you talking about a community of thinkers? Oh, I'd love to talk to them. How about a community of musicians? We don't even talk about our own practitioners as a community sometimes. Send the disciples. Send people to talk about you that you trust and love that actually are not employed by you. Market internally and externally. The internal marketing is worth its weight in gold before you even step out the door. And have the people that actually would never participate in your program, not necessarily the program practitioners, come and participate with you. Look at the facts. Data is important, period. Don't forget your mission. I think that's really, really, really crucial. So many times we do not hearken to our mission. And so that's the story. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sandra. So that's a challenge to all of us, I imagine. I'm going to invite you to take a minute to think about what that might mean for you. Sandra's just spoken in an inspiring way about communities and the work that it is possible to do, and some thoughts about how to do it. So I want to invite you to think about your own organization and thinking back to where you were when you scanned that engagement tool. Make a couple of notes about specific steps that you think that you need to take when you get home to move the conversation forward within your organization about this topic. Those may not be external steps, by the way, right? Thinking about all of the internal work that needs to happen, it's super important. Consensus building, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to take 3 minutes, 5 minutes to think about that, and just jot down a couple of notes to yourself, 2 or 3 steps for you personally as an individual to take to move this conversation forward within your organization when you get home. And we're going to take about, as I said, 3 to 4 minutes, and then we're going to share out briefly. So this is great. There's some sharing happening at tables. We'll take another minute or so to share where you are, and then we'll open up for questions.
Yeah, it should be great. That should be really invigorating. Yeah. Can you stop in our place on the way over?
I would love to.
We had an extra bedroom. My children were grown and went up.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you should go to New York and see some of the drumming circles there.
Oh, I've seen a little
What kind
bit
of
of it.
drums are they?
These are just commercial.
Djembes or
Yeah,
congas?
stuff like that. Yeah.
I mean, if you go to Prospect Park alone
Yeah.
in Brooklyn, it is like, like
Right.
master drummers.
Right. But,
Yeah, exactly, right?
but we're trying not to teach them to be drumming. In fact, when we do a session, which is about 50 minutes long, sometimes we don't drum more than 5 minutes.
No, these sessions are like, this is a social circle. This
Right.
is not a class. This is
And
in,
that's
in the tradition of drumming.
But we're seeing parents come. Yeah, I certainly do.
So let's come back together.
There you go. I'll give you mine.
We have about 5 minutes. I realize this is a crazy time frame in which to have this conversation. But let's come back to the front of the room, and I'm going to invite questions on a couple of topics. First, if you are compelled to share out some of what you've been thinking in relationship to this assignment, that's great. I'm also curious about the state of this conversation within orchestras. I feel like we have a session like this every year at conference, and interested in if you want to talk about where this conversation is within your organization, and if there are frustrations for you or barriers that you see to moving it forward, we'd be happy to entertain that, and also we can just take general questions. Yes. Absolutely. Infiltrating our constituency and bringing both together. So I think a question for all of us, and I know the League cares enormously about this too, how do we engage more musicians and invite more musicians to be a part of the conversations we have at conference, right? Because we're digging into all of these issues that are really critical ones for orchestras, and we are missing the voice of the people who, frankly, it's all about in many, many ways, who are actually performing the great orchestral music. So great point and question, and I think, I don't know, we have folks from the League here who I'm sure are noting that question.
We've tried to bring musicians, but our local won't let them come. Yeah, we tried to pay their way.
You tried to pay their way?
Tried to pay their way.
Yeah. Alan in the back.
Hi. I just want to say thank you for a great, it's such a rich topic.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yes, Sophie.
Two things quickly. Is there a way to get a copy of the presentation?
Yes, we are going to be able to provide most of the slides. So those will be up on the league website or something.
The other
Yep.
thing, being an old United Way person, and lots of communities, United Ways do needs assessments of the communities
Yep.
or your chambers, so I would encourage you to talk with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Who are other community partners who have a great set of references within the community who understand? Exactly. Yeah, great, great suggestion.
I just wondered if any of the orchestras participating have done a flash mob, and if you all think that that's a good way to begin to go into the community, to do a flash mob at Children's Hospital, or so that they would know who you are.
Has anyone done a flash mob? Flash mobs in the room. Oh gosh, we've got a bunch of them. Great. So maybe there's a discussion after this session for those of you who have done flash mobs and want to think about them. I don't know if you want to say anything about flash mobs.
We're looking at one this summer with the 4th of July concert, but we're not using. It's purely a marketing issue. It's not to try and to make any impact other than that.
I think there's a real question about what the purpose of that is and what can be perceived as a stunt, right? Something playful but really often a marketing inspired activity would actually help you forward this discussion. I think that would be one of my big questions. Yes.
I had a question for Sandra. How do you, I mean, we work for, by and large, very conservative organizations. You know, that are concerned with presenting something perfectly. And how do you sort of carve out the space in the organization for to be experimental, to risk failure, to sort of potentially create something that you may not have be able to control or predict exactly what the results are going to be?
Did everyone hear that fantastic question? Which is no. Okay, so hold me accountable if I don't get it right. Okay. So most of us work for, and I work in museums, which is kind of like a partner or sister kind of organization to orchestras in some ways in terms of perceived conservatism. He said the question was, how do you carve out the space to take risks, be innovative, and participate in good failure, I'm assuming, in an organization that actually is really in tune with perfection and controlling all aspects of the process in order to achieve perfection. Did I get it right? Okay. So these 12 steps that I mentioned earlier are, I think, important. I think that you have to create a culture of behaving that way. I think that so many times we do individual acts that don't have an accumulated impact. And I think in order to change an organization, you have to have consistent repetition. You guys know that as musicians, you have to practice. And I think that in many of the organizations, to be really quite blunt, you actually have to infiltrate the board. I am a deputy director at a museum right now. I'm chairman reporting to the executive director of the largest museum in the Northern Hemisphere now. And I am interested in policy. So you need people not only on staff but on boards that actually are involved with policy. And that not only talk about it, but actually know how to do it, so that they actually can see it when the staff are doing it. And they can say things like, why haven't we had a convening with musicians? Or why don't we require our musicians to participate in these kinds of conversations if they're going to work with youth? Like, you don't have a choice. I mean, I'm sorry, but if you're going to work with young people, you actually have to know how to work with young people. You just can't be a musician. I don't work in, I'm just saying.
That's right. You're right.
Know, so they're youth development models. So I think it's a longer discussion, and I'm happy to have with you. But I think it means planting people in all these different spaces, which is why I titled that slide "Infiltration," because it kind of is. It's like a covert curriculum. And the see it, believe it thing is really important. People that don't get the work, they kind of have to see it. You can't do a PowerPoint. They have to go and be moved. A kid has to walk up to them and be like, oh my God, did you see that? You know, or a musician has to say, I'm so thrilled that I actually collect a regular paycheck. Yeah.
Thank you. So we are at time. There is a coffee break that's happening right now. So I don't know if panelists can stick around a little bit. We could continue this conversation for people who want to talk a little bit more, but there is also a coffee break now for the next 45 minutes. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating, and thank you very much to Sandra and Warren for sharing.
Thank you.
And thank you, Christopher.
It was just giving